right, good morning. Come you to this wonderful. All right, thank you. We don't want, please put your hands together for me, please.
A journey, and for me, a very personal calling. My journey into heritage work began during my MBA program in India. One of our courses, culture, memory, and identity. That that actually lit a spark in me. When I returned to Nigeria,
say. So we said already, this is architecture from the people. All these forms of architecture go under the big umbrella of vernacular. But I'm very keen to understand more, to listen to Hezbollah about the architecture of the resistance. I like that as well. And also the architect Bisi Solu Olumide about rethinking preservation through community. For sure, I want also to thank all the participants to the panels, the three panels, the people who are talking from afar and the people who are here. And I'm also very interested to hear the roundtable dialogue about the methodology. It's such a rich program, and this program wouldn't have been possible without the effort of some people in particular. So a big thank goes to Geomeridian, who helped IFRA with the general organization, and particularly to Mrs. Dorina Odugbesan. Thank you so much. Last but not least, all the IFRA team, and first in line to Mr. Femi Olarewanju, for the excellent work he has done since quite a long time. Thank you for the people who are assisting here today, who are here today with us, and I hope you will enjoy.
You can do better, please. Architectural firms and practices, and championing the cause of conservation of imperiled architectural heritage. Her additional MA Fine Arts qualification has further equipped her to extend her research and publications to the art content of these architectural variants. One of her 3 books, Colonial Architecture in Ile-Ife, Nigeria, has been translated into the French language and continent.
About vernacular architecture, it is something really, really cardinal in terms of the people. It is the architecture of the people. So when we are talking heritage to do with architecture, there's no way we can bypass vernacular, because that is where the people's love is situated. Am I okay? I can work with this. Good, thank you. So someone warned me he'll be marking time. Okay, but this is already giving me problems. Are you sure it's working? Okay, so definitions first, so we're all on the same page. A lot has been said about heritage, and like I think it was the MC said, it does a people they don't reckon with. So whatever you bring is alternative, and they want it to endure. Vernacular architecture, several authorities have dealt exhaustively with that. We have the likes of Amos Rapoport, Paul Oliver, Bernard, Rudofsky, and I have my own experiences too in that genre. So cumulatively, when we talk about vernacular architecture, we're talking about the spontaneous, reaction, the spontaneous overtures people make when they're thinking of how to accommodate themselves. So it encapsulates their social realities, their spatial context. So it also has to do with the all-round realities in terms of the finance, the economic well-being, in terms of, the interactions they have had socio-politically, even sometimes with other cultures. There's no way as human beings we interact one with another and something is not rubbing off. So when we are talking about vernacular, particularly in the context of architecture, it's a cumulative of all those various experiences transposed to space. Then the environmental context is extremely important because, like I said, it is a people's spontaneous. That's why starting from, we'll look at the components of vernacular, but starting from the Yoruba one, because we're in Yoruba land, in an Oba's palace for that matter. Among the Yoruba, Owe was how they came together, to build, help each other build. Okay, the beauty, one of the salient things about the vernacular, it is that it is ongoing. You cannot terminate the vernacular and say it has ended, unless you're saying people's lives, people's cultures, stone dead, and that cannot happen. So it keeps evolving based on the present realities of their existence. Next. Okay, now it's working. Do I? Oh, good. I attended a conference, African Architecture Today conference at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in 2007. I presented a paper, and I had the privilege, singular, to have met up with Paul Oliver here in this picture. So he came to present. This was when he was doing his presentation. I too presented my paper, and I took this picture with him. And that was where I met up for the first time with another presenter here today in the person of architect Bisi Sulu Olumide. So we took these pictures together. So this is fed into by traditional building craft practices, by the high sociocultural ethos that, drives it, and also by a willingness to accommodate other influences spontaneously. They're not imposed. So there's no sense of anomie, because you choose what you want to bring on board. These are salient ingredients of the vernacular. Then, specifically, what are the components of Nigerian vernacular architecture? And unless we want to deceive ourselves, yes, there were a lot of negatives about colonization. But in terms of architecture, colonization played a signal role in bequeathing to us salient issues about the architecture of Nigeria's masses. Oops. Yes. So this is a more symbolic issue. We have two huts clustered on a third one. The third one is the ate. Ordinarily, it's the reception hall. That's the entrance, the reception hall. But the significance of this configuration is that only siblings from a mother can have an arrangement that uses just one ate. So if you go into a TV homestead, the number of such clusters that you see immediately tells you the number of wives in that homestead. So it's very social. This building, Ile Akogun in Ile-Ife, represents Yoruba architecture. And we know that the selling point, the unique selling point of Yoruba architecture is the impluvium courtyard. So here it is in the floor plan. Here it is in reality. This picture was taken when we went to, assess the building like 12 years ago. I'm there with one of my postgraduate students. So we're there. I'll come back to this, and unfortunately on a very sad note, but let's move on. So now we want to look at the characteristics. We have seen kind of globally what agglomerating spaces that are useless to your family. So that's the starting point. They all have that in common. Total dependence on locally available materials. If you're doing any processing, very minimal. Hands, feet, to trample, to mold your hands, very minimal. So little processing, and mostly sunshine for drying things. You don't go out of your way. You could, in some scenarios, to fire, depending on what you're actually trying to achieve. So building skills are not learned in any institution. Even if you have apprenticeship, it's very, very casual. They are more rule of thumb. Our fathers did it this way. Fojusi, oh yeah, you to learn the rudiments, on and on like that. And over time, those processes get refined based on trial and error. Okay, we did it this way. My father did it this way. It wasn't working. I saw him. I saw the result. Let me try this way. So that's what actually informs what you get at the end of the day. And cumulatively, the product is a potpourri. It's an, agglomeration of all these processes of sites, context, and everything. The built form produced traditionally is a product of all-round sustainability and social realities. You don't stress yourself unduly. There's no playing to the gallery. Who are you trying to impress? You build what suits you. You build what you can afford. You build what is convenient. You're not grandstanding. There's no need for it. So, what were the colonial precedents that we have now imbibed and are running with in our vernacular? I gave us an overview of that building the other time. Either bungalows or two-story buildings with, formerly British direct colonial. The ground raised above the natural ground level. Complex roof formations. Pronounced eaves, about 4 feet. Then extensive fenestration. You saw how I pointed out the Jekyll house all around. Of course, later they knew it was a matter of fascia boards, carved fascia boards. That was one significant thing we got from that. So the Brazilian, every other thing that I said about the British direct, but then they now have bequeathed to us what the man on the streets. That's the most, the commonest attributes of the Nigerian vernacular. The central double-loaded corridor from the original Portuguese, the passaggio. I mean, if you say to a common man, good, this Bere Foko area, the heart of Ibadan, they're all there, face me, I face you. If you say to them, this your house, Brazilian, they say Brazil, you call Brazilini. What my forefathers have been building for 10,000, which kind of Brazil? They believe they originated it because they have appropriated it. So those are the issues. Then the Brazilian type of architecture is extremely ornate. A lot of decoration. Every part of it. Columns, fascia boards, window hoods, dados, a lot of ornamentation. So this is Ile Timi, yeah? One of my long-standing former students who has been HOD of architecture at UI here is also, she's also here. So I'm speaking to the elite, but I'm telling us that vernacular spaces matter. So why? Because when you look at the term vernacular, if you understand what it means, and if you understand what heritage means, you will realize that they have a very, very important, non-negotiable interface. And that has to do with appropriating. You appropriate something. You believe strongly in something, but it doesn't stop with you. You must make it manifest. Other people must see it. For instance, I could I could love the way my grandmother used to prepare okra soup. I will never forget. I'll take that memory to my grave. Good luck to me. Why don't I teach my own children? Cook the way my grandmother used to cook it. Pass it on to my own children. And when I'm saying, look, there's no other way of preparing ilala sekpo, it will not be theory. Because I have practiced it, they see it. I could, so many things. I treasure it, but you must convince other people about it so that they too begin to understand where you're coming from and they decide whether or not it is worth, appropriating like you have done. So vernacular and heritage both speak to that. They want to pass on this legacy ad infinitum. Then vernacular is sustainable. I've been talking about that all along. It is sustainable environmentally. With vernacular, you are not constrained to your building. No. And you don't stress yourself. It took my family 7.5 years to build where we live. You'll see our house. I mean, my husband is a professor, retired now, I'm a professor. We were not professors at the time, but we were not the run of the mill. We were lecturers. But we did not have money stashed somewhere that we could just pick. We were doing it at our own pace. After all, they didn't chase us away from staff quarters where we were living. That's one thing about the vernacular. You build at your pace. You build what you want. Anybody can run their mouth. It is their mouth. But it is your building, so you do what you want. So it is economically also sustainable. And I'm sure I'm speaking the mind of, if not everybody, 90% of us here. If I say economic sense is needed in Tinubu's Nigeria. So vernacular speaks to that. Now, vernacular is the common man's spontaneous response. That's, a man wants to build. He's not he says, he sees somebody these days, or not in the past. He says 4 rooms, the corridor, 2 on this side, 2 on that side. He has solved his problem. It's everybody thinks vernacular without even knowing they're thinking vernacular. So it's the common man's first recourse to providing himself with housing. Then, since it is based on your cultural ethos, your cultural identity, there's no way at the end of the day you will not have a sense of pride. The pride comes from the cultural history, backing up what you have done. The pride also comes from your personal achievement. It's a thing that actually shames us in Nigeria, but it's our reality. And that is, many of us academics, before we develop the muscle, the whatever, to be able to build our personal houses, we have messengers in the department. We have clerks who have built their own houses because they're not wasting time on any high-fi design. They don't need an architect. Just say, and they're gone. So that's okay. So examples. Of course, immediately you will say, these are traditional. The buildings may be traditional, but the context is vernacular because the people using those buildings are extremely contemporary. Look at this lady. She may not strike you as contemporary, but this isn't how her grandmother dressed. Look at this man. Arms are kimbo, trousers and everything. I don't know what brand this is, but this is a branded t-shirt. Of course, this is not a donkey. This is a lassie. So it's in real time. And if you're not convinced enough that this is in construction, particularly in the aspect of ornamentation, all in the spirit of heritage conservation, passing it on to generation after generation. And what I particularly wanted you to see was how the ladies, people, bought into it, jeans and all, ladies in jeans, working with earth, So this is it. We have it ongoing. Okay, so Dimas Nkoko, he's a legend. Now, this brand of contemporary architecture is in the vernacular genre. He takes modern Orthodox typologies, and he uses the first work I want to talk about is a new culture studio. He specializes in environmental integration. This is an amphitheater. It's there at Mokola. He used a natural topography, and then he also used stones. Virtually every material that was on that site is what he has used to build. Stones, laterite. So environmental integration, which is what Vernacular does, which is what the traditional also did. So the second example for Dimas is the Dominican chapel. And even though the context is Orthodox Catholic Church, he has recontextualized those Orthodox issues. Look at the very form from the outside. Wearing Ibadan. Does this not remind you of the two-faced gong drum? And this is part of that complex. On the inside, 12 columns, not of the conventional reinforced concrete, but of hardwood timber. He uses decorative metal work too as screen paneling between the corridor and the main sitting area, and then most, indicting or unorthodox of all, that is Jesus on the cross. It's a must for any Catholic church. But the issue is he has recontextualized Jesus using black ebony wood and with thick lips and bulbous nose. So that's it. He's stopping me. Well, I hope this will go round. But honestly, you did not keep your own part of the Bible. You said 10 minutes and you did it in 4 minutes or 5. So I won't talk, just pictures.
All right, please, let's give the professor another round of applause again. That's a wonderful presentation. The elders will say the gray hair of an old man depicts what? Wisdom. And this time around, we're not just getting the wisdom, but what's also the intellectual capacity. Please, one more time, clap for the program. I really enjoy that. Yes, without wasting our time, please, we give the room for questions now. Just 2 persons. Question. 1. Yes.
Good morning. Prof, thank you for that video. I want to ask a question. This is a wonderful paper. But now the paper is addressing a minor audience. In some society, where majority of people living there are natives, how do you expect them to know the benefits of this topic? And then my wife was in secondary school. Nobody drugs. We do it deliberately. Nobody taught us how to do it. But nowadays, nobody is interested in those things. Our boys and girls are interested in get money by all means. Are you saying with this environmental factor of this get wealth by all means, will this thing still be able to go into people will know better about it? Thank you.
Do I address that?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. It's a monumental pity as far as I'm concerned, and I didn't get to finish. Because I'm sure you saw his slide and said a way forward. One of the issues I raised there was advocacy. Those of us who are passionate about these things, we should not keep quiet. Fora like this one now are useful. And when the lady who spoke on behalf of Global Meridian or something addressed us, she said they actually went to secondary schools. Madam, I think you said so, to engage students. So advocacy is non-negotiable. You only know what you're taught or what by experience. I designed a vernacular. I had a client, a professor. His wife was a university librarian. They are the ones who, they're the owners of the Agape hostel or whatever. So they wanted a hostel complex for OAU students and that kind of thing. And when we came to fenestration, I said to him, Prof, so you'll need to look for money for us to make the frames, timber frames, because I use timber. Because I apply my mosquito netting to the timber. The burglar proofing is on the inside. The burglar proofing is on the outside. The windows, you can relate to them freely. And then you have the nets and, few, you replace with others. But if you have one pane and a ball hits that, you replace the whole pane. So he said, I said, but Prof, this is what I use in my own house. And you visited many. He said, okay, come. So he came with his wife. And when he said, it is true, go ahead, go ahead. So we need to do things visibly so they see. People like me. But someone like Professor Barbara, she's doing her own part, convening such a forum where we can brainstorm. People who didn't know before, they now get to be enlightened and they also pass on the message. So I think that's what we can do.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your question. And I think Professor Ushashono had mentioned many things, many ways in which this can be done. The advocacy group 2 had put forward an idea, which is about catching them young. We need a curriculum review. Many times when we think about curriculum review, we're thinking about universities and higher education. Curriculum review should actually start even from even being organized to visit the museum. So talking about the vernacular, there are many ways in which the vernacular can be related to the contemporary, theoretically. For example, people are talking about climate change now, and they're talking about eco-sensitive design. They're talking about passive design. You know, if we connect the ideas of the vernacular to all these contemporary concepts, of course, people in higher education will understand that. But what we, as part of advocacy, we need to advocate contributing to education curriculum to include parts of the vernacular and the traditional, right from even when they are just in kindergarten. So they begin to understand many of these things. We see elsewhere that even little children are being taught how to even lay bricks.
Thank you so much, Prof. First and foremost, I would like to appreciate the organizers of this program, Professor Barbara, that is talking about IFRA, and of course, Geomeridian. I would like our presenter, our professor, to actually.
And we told them this building, for our general edification, the Akogun in Ife history in Yoruba land is the equivalent of a field marshal. So he's a military icon. So this was both his official and personal residence. But if he passed on, somebody else who became that kind of thing. So we saw the condition of the building and we felt, no. It left too much to be desired. So I interacted with the chiefs, told them I could come up with a renewal proposal. We would put new life into this building, retaining the salient characteristics of it so that it's a win-win situation. You get the building to be able to operate in real time and also to retain its heritage attributes. They said okay. So they flagged me off and I went and did this design. I don't know, well, the design was there, everything in place. And I showed them and they were, no, this is the original. Could we please? This is the design proposal. So when I took it back to them, the chiefs were happy. They thanked me. They said they would go and interface with the KBAC. They would get back to us. So that was it. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then one day I called up the Ife man. I said, what's going on? We haven't heard from these chiefs. He said, it was like he had been reluctant to tell me. He said, the Council of Chiefs said they want a modern building in that place. So they had bulldozed it. Even before I got to know, they had bulldozed Iliakogun. I was so upset. I'm talking of something that happened like maybe 12 years ago, even maybe 15, closer to 20 even. I was so upset that up till today, I have never gone back to that site. This is what part of my summing up at the end is that the world has become a global village. There are advantages to it. But one major advantage is that we are getting culturally disenfranchised. We are getting to the point where we are brainwashed into thinking that our heritage is worthless. Our heritage cannot stand the test of modern trends, modern thoughts. So anything wanting to harp back to the past is archaic. We must get rid of it. It's a very sad and subtle and dangerous form of brainwashing. So Iliakogun is no more. That's the bottom line.
Thank you very much, Ma. Please put your hands together once again. All right, we are now on coffee and tea break. Enjoy that. But while that is going on, some set of individuals walked in majestically while the lecture was ongoing. These are special people, so please permit me to recognize them and also introduce them to the house. I have first here on my list Reverend Christopher Ojikutu. Please put your hands together. Thank you for coming. Also, I have here a very special person, the Zonal Director for National Commission for Museums and Monuments, in the person of Mrs. Oriyomi Pamela Otsuka. Please put your hands together for her. She's a wonderful woman. She has done so much well in propagating the message across the globe as regards culture and heritage. Thank you, Ma. We also have here Architect BC Sulu Olamide Olumide. Please put your hands together. the second session of this wonderful conference. Yes, we have learned from the first speaker, and we've seen reason why we need to protect our heritage. You yourself, you are your heritage. If you are forgotten, then there is nothing to be remembered of you. That tells us how important it is to maintain this. And that is why the National Commission for Museums and Monuments had always been playing that key role to sustaining this. And as such, we advocate that every other person's, individuals, organizations, and so on should please kindly join in this evangelism. As such, we should not forget our past so that our present will be well founded, then forge ahead for the future. Thank you once again. All right, at this point, we'll move straight to the next speaker for the day. And he will be talking about alternative heritage and the architecture of resistance, preserving the sacred, the cultural, and the uncelebrated. I have this honor and privilege to introduce the speaker to the house, and that is no other person other than Dr. Tunde Adegbola. Please put your hands together. His biography. Dr. Tunde Adegbola is a scientist, an engineer, linguist, and cultural activist whose work bridges African heritage and modern technology. He holds a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Lagos, a master's in computer science from the University of Wales, and a PhD in information science from the University of Ibadan, specializing in human language technology. He is the founder of Tiwa System, pioneers in Nigeria's digital and broadcast innovation, and the African Languages Technology Initiative, AIT, which has spearheaded groundbreaking projects in African language localization, including Microsoft's Windows of Office in Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo, as well as speech recognition technologies for African languages. Over the years, Dr. Adegbola has contributed to the establishment of major broadcast infrastructure in Nigeria and West Africa, including Africa Independent Television, AIT, Channels Television, Mainframe Studios, and the West Africa Democracy Radio, WADR. In addition, he serves as an adjunct lecturer in artificial intelligence at notable Nigerian universities, inspiring a new generation of innovators. In recognition of his decades of contributions, Dr. Adegbola is currently being celebrated in the Polymath at 70 series. Please jam your hands together. Featuring a one-month exhibition titled Honoring a Living Legend at the Nord Stream Conference and Culture Center in partnership with the Dawn Commission. His
tradition, a few houses in my parents' neighborhood, in our village, in Igon Okoto, in Yewa area of Ogun State. And very interesting technology. We gather mud, put water, and they use their feet to make a consistent paste of earth, which is then thrown up to the person who is building. And as the building is going up, you need stronger and stronger person to throw up the material. And it really intrigued me as a child, the accuracy of the throwing and the dexterity of the catching, and the way something you saw yesterday at this level goes up until it is roofed. Very, very interesting sight. Tomorrow, the Cocoa House in downtown Ibadan is going to be celebrated after 60 years of its building. And it reminded me the story of an Ijesha man who came from Ilesha and got to Ibadan and looked up at Cocoa House and said, "Ah, Onijuye Ejun." Whoever threw the mud from this level to that height is a great thrower. And these are some of the realities, the dynamisms in life that we address by this gathering, looking at this culture of resistance, culture of remembrance, culture of collective look back at our culture and how it goes into the future. I've been asked to speak to the issue of alternative heritage and the architecture of resistance with the subtext of preserving the sacred, the cultural, and the uncelebrated. And I chose to add, before the uncelebrated, even the under-celebrated, because there are many things in our environment that are under-celebrated by virtue of the fact that somewhere in our psyche we think that anything that belongs to the past should be past. A clear example is the story Professor Shashono told about Dile Akogun, where people think that whatever is in the past should be in the past. Even further down the road, or is it up the road there, we have the Makpo Hall that was, as far as I'm concerned, destroyed when it was roofed with some funny materials and was tiled with probably tiles from Italy, as though we do not have materials that can do justice to the traditional wood pallets that was used to tile the place. And of course, immediately that was done, there were various other effects. The acoustics went ballistic, and various other things happened, which tells us that we should be a lot more deliberate in making changes in our situation. I have this tendency of trying to break things down to the barest minimum. It helps me. That's the way I'm able to think. In fact, some of my friends have described me as a fundamentalist, that I always go to the fundamentals, not in the negative way of fundamentalism. So I like to start by trying to define heritage. Heritage. Heritage, we can say, consists of legacy assets, which people pass from one generation before to the present, which we live by and with in the present, and we have a responsibility to pass to the next generation. That is what we refer to when we talk of legacy. Legacy, heritage. Heritage could be natural, which is formed mainly by the natural principles in nature without any deliberate human intervention. There could be adjustments of nature to human activities, but when we talk of natural heritage, we are talking of evolution of materials, of non-material reality in our environment, which are results of natural principles without much of human deliberate intervention. Then we also have the artificial, the technology induced, which results from human deliberate intervention, because humans, all living beings, have a way of adapting themselves to their environment. But human beings, to a much larger extent, not only adapt themselves to the environment, they also try to adapt their environment for their comfort and for their betterment. And that's why we say that technology answers questions raised by culture and address problems formulated by culture. That's the kind of interaction between human beings and their environment. So we have here of natural heritage and artificial heritage, or put in a more gentle way of speaking, heritage that consists of artifacts. Things that when you see, you say for sure a human being has passed this place. And these elements of heritage, both natural and artificial, determine communal memory and defines a people's identity. There could be physical objects, there could be cultural practices, there could be developed knowledge, and could be acquired values, as long as they are bequeathed from a coming to a new generation, it is heritage. The intangible, in terms of practices and experiences, for example, oral tradition, stories that have been devised by observing the environment, indigenous knowledge of traditional medicine, spiritual beliefs, scientific knowledge embedded in, for example, the Yoruba concept of Asha versus Ewo. The ones that we have deliberately put together, àwọn tí Asha, as against àwọn tí Ewo, in principles dictated by principles of cause and effects and our observation of the environment. They could be tangible in the sense of natural landscapes, part of which Professor Shashon has talked about, ecosystem, biodiversity. All these stamp the culture and give meaning to the existence of a people in the form of, say, sacred forests, heritage coastlines, and such. These elements of heritage feature intergenerational transmission, which is part of what makes them vitally heritage, which helps to connect the past with the present and the present to the future. They institute identity and belonging for a people. They work as markers of who a people are, where they come from, and where they are likely to proceed to. They embed cultural values, not just material worth, but cultural values that define and identify the community. And of very, very great importance to our engagement today is the feature of vulnerability. These elements of heritage can be vulnerable for various reasons, probably due to neglect, probably due to modernization, cultural suppression, environmental damage, and all these should be studiously engaged in such a way that the present, who had the good fortune of getting this heritage from the previous generation, discharge their responsibility of passing it to the next generation. To this extent, we can identify what we refer to as alternative. 10 minutes to go. I've had you. He's trying to make up. Alternative heritage, which we can regard as heritage outside mainstream heritage. The elements of our lives that we clearly and consciously regard as our heritage. For example, our language. We carefully and consciously see our language as something that links our past to our present and our present to our future. But even then, it is vulnerable. But even beyond that, there are other elements of our heritage that go outside the mainstream heritage. These are the marginalized elements of heritage, the intangible, and sometimes the contested narratives, contested historical narratives, which out of sometimes ignorance, out of sometimes contention with other peoples, sometimes deliberate manipulation of a people's collective memory, for example, in colonization. So all these are elements of some of the elements of vulnerability of alternative heritage. Now, alternative heritage can, as Professor Shashino has so eloquently presented, preserve through architecture, through rituals, through place-based memory. Somebody spoke earlier on of the Bowers Tower. That's a place-based memory. Both in Bower on Yoruba history. Also, we talk about sacred, we talk about alternative heritage being particularly vulnerable, and that's important to what we want to speak to today. Now, my title specifically talks about architecture of resistance. I am not an architect, and I think it is the wisdom of the organizers to put before me a celebrated architect. So I can jump the architectural, the aspects of architecture of resistance, but I understand architecture as the art and science of the use of space. Am I right? Almost, yeah. Not too bad for a non-architect. But for me, as an information scientist, as a human language technologist, I see space beyond the entity or the phenomenon that accommodates physical objects. I am taught about vector spaces in which we insert words, and every word has multiple dimensions. When you say a particular word, there are various things that define that word. And somehow, in the development of human thought, in the development of particularly the subject of artificial intelligence, we are now able to represent words with numbers to the extent that if you subtract the number that represents the female from the words, that wonderful things that architects do to the physical space also exist in other spaces, because space as a phenomenon has this inherent capacity to accommodate objects. Now, when we talk about architecture of resistance, I will be talking a little much more than architecture from the point of view of the science and art of managing physical space. I'll be talking also of the architecture of these other spaces that I made allusion to. Architecture of resistance talks to the symbolic and strategic capacity of architecture as a process of design. Design being typified by deliberateness. You do things for specific reasons. A design is something that you come about by considering the various, thank you, 5 minutes, by considering the various extenuating factors. So, when we look at space from that point of view that I have presented, we now are able to look at more than buildings, more than monuments, more than physical structures in society, but we go along to some of the less physical, the more ideational aspects of human thought that shape society. And I believe that gives us a much more robust view of the concept of architecture of resistance. But just to dwell a little more on architecture from its traditional perception, taking a cue from Professor Shashona's earlier presentation, architecture has a way of preserving identity. Because the results of the work of architects persist, naturally they preserve identity. Therefore, they are capable of bringing about counter-narratives in mainstream heritage. Because she gave the example earlier on of Brazilian architecture, the effect of Brazilian architecture on Nigeria's, a number of Nigeria's capital cities, because of the effect of the emancipados that came from Brazil after slave trade to establish crafts, practical, technological skills, as the European colonialists were establishing basically knowledge-based skills. They were the artisans, the carpenters, the builders that formed our environment. So that is the way in which this architecture are able to give us counter-narratives. Professor Sharon alluded to the fact that in Ibadan you see examples of Brazilian architecture, but those who live in the houses born 50 years ago do not actively embrace the history that this is where this architecture comes from. But then, those who know can point to it because the architectural object provides the basis for that counter-narrative. Architecture also provides capacity for spatial resistance. Don't put that kind of thing in that kind of place. All these are now Russian. But beyond the physical, material objects of architecture from the traditional sense, there are also elements of our non-material less physical, intangible heritage that exists in our orature, in our thinking, in our understanding of our environment. And these also provide this capacity for architectural resistance. Let me just offer an example, also coming from the discussions that the MC had been having with Professor Shashona. In Yoruba
there is the concept of Orisha. Today, ask the average person, what is Orisha? What you are likely to hear is God with a small g. Now, how do you explain that a people that did not have a form, a system of writing, made a distinction between capital G and lowercase g? So maybe Orisha is not really lowercase God. So how do we then engage Orisha? Let us go into orature. Orature says, that you don't canonize a person when he's still alive. Orature says, that this phenomena that you refer to as Orisha were human beings. That's what Yoruba orature says. Whatever European paganistic polytheism says, we cannot go by that to define Orisha. The problem that seeing Orisha as God brings about is that it deprives us of heroes. Because rather than see Orunmila as a hero, as a philosopher, as somebody who had systematized binary arithmetic a few hundred years before George Boole, before Leibniz were born, then once we see Orunmila as Orisha, as God, then we don't engage, because gods with small g, by European gods and goddess principles, act on whims and caprices. They cannot be studied scientifically. So we are deprived of knowledge of why Ogun, the Yoruba notion of metallurgy, is propitiated, worshipped with palm oil, a lubricant, that will prevent it from Ogun going rusty. So these are some of the elements in our non-material architecture that we need to bring about systems to dominant narratives. In closing, part of the problem that our engagement of our past presents is that the totality of our past is encased in origin. And we live in an age where all of us who should be engaging our past had been trained that you can only find knowledge in books. 200 and over 200 years ago, European missionaries came to Nigeria, and because Christianity is a religion of the book, they made spirited efforts to bring about literacy. But today, ask in a typical church, ask a Yoruba Christian to pray. Before he starts praying, he goes goes into an orature of Olodumare that has been developed through predominant narratives. Let in closing now, finally. I know it's -1 minute to go now. People of the written culture look down on origin. But the example of the Yoruba culture tells you that there is a lot much more richer than the opposite of literature. A child, and the mother goes into telling him or her in, say, Kutuwenji. When you have a contention with another or your origin, just tell them, let's trace our history back and see who is the bigger one. That's why I say
ọmọ òpó kájà kárọ̀ yọ káwé tó ní bàbá tó jura wọn lọ. So when you see a people whose history is recounted every day, ritualistically, as we people of the book will say, but routinely, scientifically routinely, according to the principle of taking information from short-term memory into long-term memory by rehearsal, then we find that there are strong elements in this culture which we can use to resist dominant narratives that want to destroy some of this alternative heritage. As we say in Yoruba, I've exhausted what I have in my mouth, so let me answer
it. Please, you can do better, please. Dr. Tunde Adegbola has really inspired me a lot. I think I met him first time in the museum when he came for, I think, same IFRA program like that. I can't be correct. Aha! He's deeply rooted in culture. There is not how you see Dr. Tunde Adegbola giving his lecture. There was this mix-up of Yoruba coming in and so on. I love that. He's trying to like bring us down to the road. Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful. I'm not a Yoruba man. I'm from our state of Nigeria. But there's something about me I really appreciate. In-law. Please, can you clap for my in-law? Yes. I've come to love Yoruba people because of this eulogy of the kind and so on. Yeah. So thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We'd love to have more of you in museum. God bless you. All right, the session now is a Q&A, question and answer session. If you have question, 1, 2. First person.
Sorry, it's not really a question, it's a contribution. I want to support what Dr. Adegbola said about genius in the Yoruba land being given spiritual attribution. I had an experience many years ago. I was researching into some architectural decorations in Israel, and the man who was responsible, he told me he had also been responsible for the mosque at Odeowo. So I decided to go to Odeowo and I saw that mosque. And I went there. They said I needed to see the imam before I could go around and do everything. So the imam now came out to see me, and I told him I was researching into the works of Baba Odulami. The moment I mentioned Odulami, the imam went, Iwe! Iwe is spiritual being. Because he knew the man had done so much that maybe an ordinary person shouldn't have done. And part of why the man was outstanding was, even though he was blind, at one time, my dad supervised the fasting, and that dope is still empty tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Dr. Adegbola for that very deep lecture about Yoruba culture and everything. I just want to ask a question. The resistance of the written tradition to the oral tradition, can we say it is the same resistance that is not making us to even take care of our heritage places? What exactly is it that we so much, whether it's the tangible or the tangible or the intangible, do we really don't care so much that our heritage places are going into ruins? Can we say it is the same way that our oral tradition has become something forgotten. Are there forces that are against this? Because this is something that is real and contemporary. I'll give a clear example. We have only 2 UNESCO recognized places in Nigeria, and they are both in ruins. And what is the problem? Is it that people that are very literate, that understand the written tradition, are still the ones that are working against it? Because we would naturally say that our oral tradition is being worked against by colonialism and other forces. Please, sir, what can we say about this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will sum it all up. There are lots of dimensions, but I think I will sum it up under the conflation between modernization and westernization. Modernity is fundamentally an improvement of what exists, and necessarily the modern is different from the existing. That's why this is a different thing. It's an advancement. Whereas, like I said, and I just in passing gave the example of Vernacular, clearly the Yoruba were far ahead of Europe in conflicting quantitative understanding of data and qualitative understanding of data. In Western traditions, there is usually a gap between qualitative approach, quantitative approach. But long before either Leibniz or George Boole, after whom Boolean algebra was instituted, long before they were born, Orunmila had seen the need when he was indexing the Old River, when he was cataloging large volumes of knowledge held by memorization and recitation. When he had seen to index, catalog, and classify, he did the texts as based on analogies, like most of humanity did until about 50-60 years ago. But the long went with modulo 2 arithmetic that European scholarship brought about a few hundred years later. So the moment we now see that westernization is necessarily modernization, of course we are bound to throw away everything. I have spoken like this at some forum, and professors have come to that. How can you be equating some mumbo-jumbo with philosophy? And I said, well, I'm not, but because Professor Sophie Oluwole had already experienced that on my behalf. Professor Sophie Oluwole was the first PhD in philosophy graduated from the University. She fought and lost to study Orunmila as a philosopher. And her supervisor then, don't worry. When you get a PhD, you now have the right to anything more. Do the modernization, the westernization of modernization we're asking you to do. Get your PhD and...
Thank you, sir. Now is how can we protect our local rituals, arts, and rituals without necessarily commercializing them and distorting their value?
Thank you very much. Very important question. In fact, when you started asking, I was thinking of the question from a totally different point of view to brought in commercialization. Because that's another. There are various factors that work against our culture, our past. Somebody said to me that the reason why traditional medicine, ethnomedicine, herbology, as against herbalism, did not thrive is because we did not have a patent. That when somebody has a stomachache, they say, take him to Baba so and so. And Baba so and so has that. He is rewarded.
Sulu Olumide to the microphone. Kindly be our guest. Keep clapping, please, until she comes here.
Thank you very much. And I need to just extend my appreciation to IFRA for inviting me here. And I greet every distinguished member who is present. And I hope you enjoy what I have to say. Not much, but I have a little to say. So the fact that we're here today and the mix of people who are here actually shows that we do have an issue when it comes to heritage. Now, Dr. Adegbola has explained what heritage is, and also Professor Shasono has given examples of heritage. But my take is a little bit different. And I'm going to speak about the fact that, like I said, the people here, we're all part of the problem. Because generally we'll be regarded as the elite. Elites not necessarily referring to bank balances, but our orientation and our way of thinking. Now, what we have here in terms of how we view heritage is how we who have been to school view heritage. We view it as something which is there, but let's try and distance ourselves because it does not project us in the way that we want to be seen by the society that we want to appeal to. So we want to appear knowledgeable. We want to appear learned in the Western way. We want to appear as if we have acclimatized, that we have accepted, we have imbibed cultures that make us seem better than the man next to us. So many of our heritage narratives are driven by experts, quote and unquote, the doctors, the professors, people who have been to school, and they tell us what our heritage is and what it is not, they assume. And so the person who experiences that heritage is not involved in this conversation. But we accept that for Grove, which is one of the 2 World Heritage Sites, is our heritage. It is, but it is not only that. We accept, I thought, how else can we celebrate him but to use a fabric of his ancestry. So we don't have those experiences anymore. Now the communities where these heritage activities, where the heritage practices and rituals are common, are not involved in the conversation. So yes, I guess the Osun Osogbo Festival happened, and I think it was just recently, the last one happened. But beyond the devotees, are the people in Osogbo, are they involved in how it is presented? Are they the frontliners who are the ambassadors to tourists, to other devotees, to the world about beyond that week or so many days when the festival is on? What are their lives like? How are they showcased as the custodians of that heritage in that area? We don't know about that. We're never told about that. So I think that we need to have a shift. such that we have people-centered heritage. We need to begin to own our own heritage and to get rid of some things that are creeping in. And I don't know whether it is deliberate, whether we have just allowed these things happen, or whether we're not even aware. And I'd like to speak about something which I find very disturbing. The way we have allowed our names to be, I wouldn't even say anglicized. I went somewhere one day, and I am the kind of person that I like to understand a person's name. So, not Professor Oshason, I know her first name is an English name. But if a young lady comes up to me and maybe she's looking for work and says her name is Precious or her name is Blessing, I say, what is your native name? Your grandfather, when you were named, he had an aspiration for you, and he gave you a certain name. You say, my name is Itunu, or my name is Bukola, or something. I said, there's a meaning inside that name. Blessing, Precious, does not connote the same meaning. But we are quick to adopt those names. So I met a young lady. I said, my name is Hadeola. And I said, excuse me? Hadeola. And I said, please, D-E-Y-L-O-R, Hadeola. And I wonder why we have allowed ourselves be put in a mold where we are not proud of what we have. Again, we, for some reason, especially in the Yoruba area, have decided to create different forms of the food that we have that are indigenously ours. And therefore, we have begun to equate, for some reason, we have to equate what we have to what somebody else has. And so, a birthday cake is the akara oyinbo. As far as I know, akara has always been made from beans. And fried, and with salt and all. I'm yet to see a birthday cake that has salt. I'm yet to see a birthday cake that's made of beans. Why do we have to call birthday cake akara oyinbo? Why do the Japanese not have any other interpretation for sushi, which is raw fish, some rice and spices, placed in a leaf and wrapped and served raw? Why must we be in such a hurry to leave what we have, and not even just leave it, but denigrate it? Calling or giving a name that is not our name is an insult in a way. If someone calls the average person on the street a name which is not theirs, the person will react. That's not my name. But we have allowed ourselves, because we want to be seen, architecture. And the fact that and somebody asked why we are, I think it was Professor Jayoba that asked about our old buildings. And my issue with old buildings right now, because we have tried to find buildings while I'm at the University of Lagos, and the number that are available to be studied are decreasing over the years. Now, we have found out that even in environments such as the revered palace that we are in, across the Southwest, we have the situation where old buildings are demolished in the name of modernity, improving, brand new, a new person has come in, what have you. There's always an excuse. And my question is, those who are the custodians of our tradition, why do they not say, Otoge, this belongs to my great-grandfather's great-grandfather, Kowambe. We will build another one, but that old one will remain untouched. We'll always have relevance to where we are going to. But because, for some reason, I don't know whether it's a sponsorship, or those that sponsor, or the fact that in our architectural education, which is the issue that I have, and I'm guilty, that I'm trying to do my bit, we teach, or we appear to teach across board, and Prof may be able to correct me, that new is good and old is not so good. So when we grade, a lot of people would ascribe higher grades to work that shows maybe the international style, modernism, and things like that relevant to our requirements. But there are certain things that may be extracted from them and will always be relevant. So when it comes to the architecture, the role of architecture being relevant is the fact that the spaces that we design afford certain aspects of interaction that enhance the experiential sharing of our heritage. And I'll explain it this way. In the days of old, the Yoruba courtyard houses were not houses as such, they were compounds. And agbole, where everybody who had a lineage areas of exclusion, the room of the head of the household had a certain air of authority, which was carried through by the head of the household. But it afforded community activities and communal activities, which people were able to learn from in those environments. But what do we have nowadays? If I ask any young person where they would like to live, they say, I want my room en suite. I must have my room, my bathroom and toilet, my DSTV, my TV, my remote, everything. I want to be on my own. So most houses are developed and designed in that way nowadays, such that the interaction.
We have Otolo,